Alrighty, everybody, welcome back to the Manifest Your Success podcast. Today we are joined with John Bianchi. John is the CEO of Blue Comet Media and the founder of the Omega Agency. Welcome to the show, John.
Sam, Kyle, this is a lot of fun. Thanks for having me on board today, guys.
It is going to be a lot of fun. So actually, a perfect topic. Actually, you start. I've never heard of this. I've like researched people that talk about like martial arts and whatnot, but I've never heard of Krav Maga. So like, how did you get into that? And like, how is that different? Just like than anything else?
That's an awesome question. So I will correct it because I think my teacher would be a little. It's Krav Maga. But Krav Maga is fascinating. So I guess, about 70, 75 years ago, there was an idea of how to merge specific martial arts that were focused on combat level skills, but also with the idea of reducing the time that you're involved in a fight to get home safe. So everything about Krav Maga is about getting home safely. So in what ways can you disable, disarm, or incapacitate an opponent or an attacker, an assailant, to get yourself to a place where you can get home safely? So a lot of martial arts focus on, forms and have, more graceful parts of the system, which is all awesome and great and fine. Krav Maga is really about understanding combat level skills that you can use to ensure your own personal safety. So in essence, it takes a mix of different martial arts for different combat scenarios, from some Brazilian jiu-jitsu ground fighting techniques that we might work on specifically if you do get knocked to the ground. Obviously, a lot of like kicking and kickboxing from Muay Thai or other kickboxing style arts. But then really one of the biggest and most primary pieces of Krav Maga is American boxing, or boxing in general, from just being able to understand how to deliver hits effectively, quickly, bob and weave and dodge. And also, again, the whole idea is not about not getting hit. You expect in a combat scenario that you're going to absorb some damage or pain, but the idea would be that you stay awake, alive, and with the ability to get out of that situation as quickly and as effectively as possible. Most people don't realize that almost all combat scenarios that you could be in will only last a maximum of 30 seconds, and oftentimes are a lot less. Now, the time seems to go much more slowly if you're involved, unfortunately, in one of these scenarios that's not a controlled environment like being in the studio. But if you can pass that 25, 30 second mark in that situation, most likely you're going to be able to stay alive and get home eventually at some point. So how did I get into Krav? I was looking for, it was about, I guess 4 years ago or 5 years ago, was kind of looking to get back in shape. I wanted to study a martial art. I wanted to do something that I thought could also improve my mental health. And I didn't want to just go do karate or something like that with no experience. And I think I saw a flyer or something, and maybe one of my friends had told me about this, who had done BJJ before, and was like, you should check out Krav Maga. It's got a good basis of all this different type of stuff. So I really enjoyed it. I've got to be more consistent all the time. I've gotten a little busy, but I think it's a really good foundational skill to learn, because you have a mix of different things. I would actually say this is my one advocation for Krav specifically. I think it's personally the best martial art for women to learn, because it provides extreme skill in scenarios that most likely women encounter more than men. So that's kind of my, I guess, pitch for Krav. But yeah.
So how long have you been doing that now?
So I've done Krav, I guess, for about almost 3 years. Like I said, I need to get a little bit more consistent and get back in the gym, but I passed, I guess, the kind of second level of what we were doing into third level. I guess it was a little bit under a year ago.
Where have you seen it like apply in your real life, like daily life? Because I know like martial arts, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and it's like people in there, it's a whole mindset thing, and it really just carries over everywhere else. So like, can you think of any examples that you learned in Krav Maga and it's like, okay, wow, I really apply this to this situation and carried it out?
Well, I'll give it two ways, because there's always the physical side of any martial art that we kind of see. The mental side of martial arts, I believe, is actually more applicable in a day-to-day basis. So fortunately, I've never had to be in a combat scenario where I had to use any of these skills that I've had, and I've never witnessed that. I mean, besides going to see John Wick, which that's actually a basis of Krav, and he does mix in some Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu along with weapons training, which we do get into in some of the advanced levels. But no, I've never had to use it in an actual combat scenario. I will say, what I did use, I had just an unfortunate incident with somebody. Never really went anywhere, which was good, but it was just road rage, and it was in a parking lot, and this fellow was just out of control, and my sister was in the car with me, and so in that scenario, a lot of people you could tend to freeze up, or you could tend to escalate the scenario, get out of your car, and start yelling back. Right? Depends on there's different ways that can go. And what I was able to do, and I believe my training has helped me with this, was to maintain a level set of calm, understand what the actual potential dangers were, which would be if she exited the vehicle more than me. So I just put my arm out and I said, stay seated. I'm going to pull into the space and I'll let the guy just drive off. And I'm going to keep the windows closed. And I did. And, then he just, got in the way, went back in his car and drove off. Right now, fortunately, he didn't smash our windows or anything like that. That would have been a whole other level. But it's also being able to understand when not to escalate a situation, which gives you that sense of confidence that you might need. And really, I think that's something that people say across the board from martial arts, is the confidence that you can build with being able to say, I can protect myself. I do have this skill set, but it's not necessary for me to use that right now and to have that mental clarity, which is why I think most of the time that I've used anything really from martial arts and from Krav Maga is understanding the action, reaction, and balance and level setting and clear-mindedness that you need to have in business. It's been a great experience for me, and I would advocate it for anyone. Even just try it. And yeah, I might be one of those guys that actually likes to take a punch every now and then, just in a controlled scenario. But that's me, so I wouldn't recommend that for everybody. But at least go out and try it. Try a class, learn a new skill. It's great to learn.
Yeah, I think I might actually look into it, because I think it kind of sounds like it comes from the perspective of, instead of wanting to get into that fight and take your chances of winning, the goal is to kind of safely exit the fight, which more often than not is the right decision, because, you never know what someone might have on them.
Absolutely.
So you always want to lead the scenario. But I guess, so transitioning into, I guess, your time in marketing.
Sure.
So when did this kind of start? What drew you into digital marketing and social media marketing?
Wow, that's a great question. So I've been in, I guess, the marketing and advertising PR space since 2010, when I was a sophomore in college, I think. Even before that, I had done some video production in high school. I was interested in communications and really fully understand it, back before I went to college. I think kind of how I got into that was I really like storytelling. And I think that all life is about being a part of telling and creating great stories. And I think that advertising and marketing is just our ability to translate a client's value to someone who's interested in being a part of their community with a great story. So I started in PR. I'd gotten a job at a PR agency in New York City when I was going to school up there. Ended up graduating with a communications degree, and then found a job at a marketing and advertising agency for global corporate conferences, and really was all the way through from there. And I don't know if you want to learn a little bit about the story of BCM and Omega, but it's always been my desire to teach, tell, and show value, rather than just to talk about it. And the best way to do that is to create lasting impressions, whether it's visually or it's with great copy. And so that's why I love it, and that's how I get into it. That's why I wanted to do it.
Right, that's awesome. I can actually, when you said about telling a story, I actually owned a social media marketing company, and our motto is actually every good story needs a photographer to tell it. And it's just kind of like attracting people. Like, okay, everyone has a story. All you need is a camera. Like, I mean, we've talked about this on some of our past episodes. All you need to do is press record. Yeah. And like, obviously there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff, but like, that's just the idea of it. And I'm just curious, like so you started back in 2010, and that's kind of like, I don't know, I feel like ever since this decade, we've just fast forwarded so much when it comes to like digital marketing and digital media. So what were some like things that you've seen back then that like aren't really successful today?
Yeah, it's interesting. So actually, I think Facebook was founded, 2007 or something like that, or maybe a little bit earlier, 2005. And I think Twitter became really big in like 2009 or so, or maybe right after he founded it. And it was massive back then. It was like the big like new thing. Everybody had to be on Twitter. I don't know if you ever heard of this company called Clout. You used to have a Clout score, which rated your effectiveness and engagement on the internet of all platforms. Fascinating. I think that's coming back, by the way. But then what's changed is there used to be this massive push around combining different like digital and physical elements, like even print media. Print media is almost gone today. Now, at certain times you can use it, sure, you still have to have physical items, but from what we were doing back then of printing, these massive pieces of information, mailing them out, that's virtually non-existent. Everything has moved digital. Even with just how we engage with the iPhone, which that's just an entirely new process based on from when I started. I think when I started in 2010, I was still on like a Verizon flip phone. There just was, the smartphone wasn't as accessible as now. Like almost everybody has at least some version of a smartphone. So those are some of the things that I've seen that have changed. Is we've fully embraced the digital age, whereas I think in 2010 we were getting there. Email was there. So some social media was there. Sure, Facebook, Instagram. A lot of it was based on just who could get that really massive following. The last thing I would say is the algorithms have changed. Obviously, with advertising, the algorithms are all focused on a pay-for-play system. So a lot of times, what I used to see back in the day was the ability for someone to kind of go viral just by being somebody who went out downtown in New York City and went to different restaurants. There was a fellow, I think his name was the Sartorialist, and he used to write for one of the magazines. And he would just go out, dressed really well, take pictures, and go out and write food articles. Yes, of course, he was associated with a magazine, but he was able to get a lot more following, not having to compete with some of the advertising that was existent or really not existent at the time. Whereas now, I mean, every third post you see on Instagram is an ad from a paid perspective. So are you really seeing all the great content even from your friends that they post? Well, stories help, but you're not really seeing that live feed anymore, which is why I think it's interesting that Twitter's coming back, because you are seeing it on there.
Yeah. Actually, that's an interesting topic, Twitter itself, and then also what you mentioned about the Clout score. You said that you think it might come back, or is that a valid prediction? And like, how do you think that plays out? Like, if it really does?
Well, I'll say in two ways. So first of all, it was an extremely helpful tool just to gauge like your actual impression share. The reason I say it may come back in some specifics is I was looking at the new insights that Instagram is providing for professional accounts, and I was like, wait, I've seen all this before, and it was like, okay, so this has all been there. Now, how do you move it towards combining all the different social platforms with the APIs? That's what happened, is a lot of the APIs became closed, or they're not playing nice with each other. So even like social media scheduling platforms, Facebook's making a play just to have everything come through Creator Studio. So these third-party platforms that can aggregate data it's not as easy for them with these big companies now wanting to protect that. Why I say I might see it come back is we are hearing some things like social credit score, blockchain factors into this. Like, I think it would be very fascinating if we were able to see in a decentralized way, like who owns what NFTs, what smart contracts, what DAOs they're a part of, what social media platforms they prefer to engage with, all behavioral analytics that I don't have to know your name, I don't have to know your age, I don't have to know, gender, all these like real hardline definers that people are more concerned about giving. But everybody doesn't have a problem with showing their behavioral analytics. I mean, who doesn't go out on a Friday night and see like all the different girls are taking pictures of where they are, time, place, dated, 2 locations, where as like I was talking to my mom, she's like, we would never do that. Like, you jump in a car today with somebody you don't know and say, take me home to a location that's your actual house. Nobody would do that in 2006. Like, they were worried about taking cabs in New York and always go with a girlfriend and like make sure that they stayed at the same place. Now people, they don't care. So behaviorally, we are totally fine with sharing the data, which is why I think something like Clout might come back in some sort of decentralized way, if not in some sort of centralized way beforehand.
Yeah, so you mentioned how kind of when you go on Instagram nowadays, it's like every few posts is an ad. Mm-hmm. So do you think for someone maybe who's creating their own content or a business that's trying to get their content out there, is it even possible for someone like that to reach an audience without employing any sort of marketing strategies or anything like that? Or is that just completely non-exist anymore?
I don't think it's completely non-existent. I think it has to do with better defining and targeting your target audience and demographic, meaning if you do use the right hashtags, if you do post consistently, if you are part of the right conversations and you use the right channels where your audience lives and wants to consume media, I don't think it's impossible. The reason why I say, we're inundated with ads, and by the way, I'm running an advertising agency, so I'm totally fine with this, but we target to people who are most likely to use those products and services. People don't mind being advertised things that they could actually use or they feel is an enhancement to their life. It's just when that marketing and that advertising is not correct and it feels out of place. Like in the gaming world, we use a term like people don't want to bump into something. They don't want to feel like the world is bumpy. It's got to have the right feel, the right branding. Everything's got to feel like it makes sense. If something's out of place, we don't like that. So is it impossible? No, I don't think it's impossible. I actually think that what is again coming back is influencer marketing. Not necessarily in the way of like, you're going to pay this girl to travel around all your hotels. You might still do that. I'm seeing a lot less travel influencers being employed at this point, and no travel influencers get mad at me on this, but I'm just not seeing brands go that route as much. But what I am seeing is cross collaboration with individuals who already have follower count to then get connected and get to be a part of the conversation. And I think Joe Rogan's a great example of this. Like how many people have come on his show and then they built up their following, and it's because they had either a personal connection or something of interest that he wanted to chat with them about. Same thing you're seeing on, like the different podcasts that Barstool Sports has. There's a number of guys who have gone viral just by working at Barstool, popping on one of the podcasts, having a great conversation, and now they're an influencer. So I think that's a part of the way it can be done is actually a reversion to the community marketing that we used to see back in the day.
That's very interesting. You mentioned data analytics and how they're so powerful, mm-hmm. and how you were talking about when you actually are launching an advertisement, you need to understand your audience that is behind that advertisement, because obviously if you're running a real estate ad for a bunch of video game fanatics, you're probably not going to get that many clicks. So how would someone properly structure an advertisement mm-hmm. to reach that? Like if, say for example, real estate, or you could pick any category right here, how would you structure the advertisement to make sure that real estate influencers or people click that ad and pay attention to it?
Yeah, great question. So there's a couple of different ways to do it on each different platform. We run a lot of campaigns on Google search and display. Google's AI behind being able to provide the right keywords and optimize for placement based on search interest, it's unbelievable. It's fantastic. Now, of course, it's AI. You still have to think about how you want to present the journey on that platform. So my point about that is, yes, you can put in this keyword data set. Yes, they can scan your website and pull out these different interest points that they believe make sense for your customers and audience. That's inbound search. So someone's actually searching for help me with this challenge, or find me this place, or find me this new product or service. So with Google, you can get very specific to finding that audience. Now, where you don't get Google's help is, I've talked with a number of real estate companies, and I said, well, why are you only running Google search ads for new home buying in, let's say, Raleigh, North Carolina, when this market is so saturated? You're competing with every other realtor out here who's doing the same thing. Why not run some search ads in, let's say, New York, LA, San Francisco, whatever city is your inbound market? Because those people are actually in a buying decision to come here before they're going to come here if they're coming to buy a home. So how are you going to compete with everybody on the ground? But think creatively about your funnel of where people are coming from. Then, yeah, you might not get any sales out of that, zero. But you know what you might build up? You might build up a data set and an audience that you can remarket to after you know they're location based here in Raleigh. Oh, yeah, because they actually came here for the weekend. They're actually looking for a home. Now you have that audience built up. So that's one way to do it. Facebook does it interest-based, where you know what people are interested in, what the search results are, and tries to find the right person to present the media to. Google is run by, YouTube is run by Google, so you're actually able to tap into their search there. So each of the platforms gives you some flexibility, but it also comes down to great copy. It also comes down to great storytelling and positioning, because if your ads, if they suck and they don't actually make any sense, and, you're not speaking to what's the actual driver that somebody wants and what they're interested in, it might be targeted well, but they're not gonna engage with it. And that's what we find why we're successful as an agency, is because we're all here in the United States. We understand how to use the English language, and we understand how to write great copy for ads, which also is 50% of how to write a great ad. You can target it, but you got to write a good one, and that has to be from experience, which is something that I've built up over time.
Yeah, that's awesome. I don't think we can. You mentioned Google a lot and the AI. I'm not. Are you familiar with ChatGPT that just released?
I am.
Okay. So what are your thoughts? Yeah. What are your thoughts on how that will disrupt the ad advertisement industry and business, especially Google?
Yeah. So first of all, I am extremely tech forward. So I am really excited about this. I haven't used it yet, but I've been following a bunch of stuff on Twitter on this. So two things I thought was really interesting. There was a lawyer on Twitter who posted and said, like, to the U.S. government, I don't know if he was joking or not, but he was like, we actually might need to regulate this, because he asked it to write a contract, like a legal document that was like perfect. And it's just because it's built up inside the AI. And what that means is, why would you pay your lawyer to write simple contracts for you anymore? I mean, you can pay a lawyer for you can pay anybody for consulting on anything with their business experience, but like paying for all this, big contracts and like tens of thousands of dollars and hours to just get a simple service agreement, probably don't need it, right? So he was getting nervous that this could actually replace that. Now on the marketing side, while I do think that it can write good copy from a perspective of collaborative understanding of what the responses are, I don't think it can write great copy in the sense of, like, I came up with the name of a product literally an hour ago in the blockchain center, and that's just because I can understand how to put things together that AI wouldn't be able to understand what's important to the customer. I do think that this type of AI can be helpful for if you're kind of trying to generally get an idea of maybe what the collective conscience wants to see, and then pull that out. Like on Google, you have a character limit. So if you ask the AI to write something, it might be over the character limit. So you're saying, okay, well now, or maybe it can write it in 30 characters. I don't know. And that's going to be one of your headlines, and you have to write 15 of them. So you kind of work it into how you would write those ads. If you're trying to come up with like a massive spread, then it might be more difficult based on like putting words together that don't actually mean anything. A lot of great advertising campaigns like Got Milk, I don't think an AI could write that, because that has really nothing to do with what they were trying to present, and then also pairing that with a milk mustache. AI is not going to get that, because it doesn't actually make any. That's actually doesn't make any sense. But we get it as humans because we have humor. I'm actually very interested to see where it goes from a professional perspective, but I think the consulting is where you would have to move as an advertising agency if it ever got to the point where it could write better than, let's say, someone like me.
Yeah, so it sounds like you kind of think that the AI isn't going to be able to have the creativity that maybe a creative influencer or marketer would have. Mm-hmm. But I think I saw something interesting. So GPT-3, which is like the latest version that they launched it on Wednesday, which is 5 days ago.
Yeah.
And it just hit 1 million users today.
Yeah.
Which is insane, just the demand that there's been for it. But I think one thing that people have found to be one of the strongest use cases for it is for like super technical searches, such as like debugging code or finding, a super technical question. It immediately finds the result and displays that, whereas Google search engine isn't equipped to do that.
No.
It might find a accurate, like semi-accurate result, but you got to go searching through it through a link. It won't pop that right up underneath the search bar, and I think that's just so valuable for that exact reason.
Absolutely. No, I think in any of these new technologies, the tech space will always find, it's Occam's razor, right? The simplest and most effective use of any technology at any time. That's where we have to start. Eventually, I mean, if I was just a copywriter, right, and didn't have other business ventures and hadn't started a company, and AI doesn't have experience of starting a company, working with humans. Like, it's a whole people management. Those are types of things that just, it doesn't have that capability to understand that. if I was just a copywriter and I was writing like legal contracts, yes, I'd be concerned. Now, it also comes down to trust. Are people going to trust that an AI wrote this? See, for me, as kind of a tech-forward guy, I'm like, it's probably better than a human writing it because it's probably not going to have mistakes, which that's just, my take on it. But I think that that's where it will start, is exactly kind of in what you said is, yeah, I mean, if I look, it's the whole idea of, how far away are we from an AI, performing brain surgery? I mean, to be quite honest, like if it can actually make that type of decision making and its hands are not going to shake and it's not going to sweat, this is nothing against brain surgeons because I would not want an AI to do brain surgery at this current time, but I'm just saying, like, think about where you could actually get even automated technology to assist a doctor in a procedure like that, where if he's got to stop, there's no shake, it's steady, and then you can implement that type of technology. So a lot of this is already being used today, but I think it's really fascinating where that's going to go.
I agree. And actually, I was just on the topic of AIs doing surgery. I was just watching this Neuralink presentation, and they're actually planning. Yeah. They actually showed how an AI will literally do surgery to insert the Neuralink, which is actually going to be insane if they're successful with that. And secondly, also just something like to comment about ChatGPT. Obviously, it's not perfect right now. I mean, I was watching on Twitter too, and it was some dude posted, and he was asking the search engine like, what is the fastest marine animal? Yeah. And it kept saying like peregrine falcon, and like it was working through it, and it was cool to see because like he would talk back to him and be like, it's not a marine animal. I thought it's a bird. And then it'll be like, oh, you're right. I made that mistake. Yeah. So it's really interesting.
Oh, I have a whole theory behind why Elon bought Twitter. And it's really just to supply a massive amount of information to AI. So
I mean, yeah, social media is really powerful.
I think it's really cool.
I'm sure there's a number of reasons. Actually, I want to dive deeper into this AI thing because I'm so fascinated by it. I want to get into the story of you founding Blue Comet Media and whatnot. Sure. But you mentioned like the got milk and how AIs might not be able to understand like that connection there. But do you think that like soon AIs will evolve to the point where they can see all these marketing campaigns like Coca-Cola, like McDonald's, Got Milk, just the signature brands? Do you think they're going to be able to recognize that and then develop a campaign like Got Milk and like Coca-Cola like in years to come?
I mean, I would think that it's entirely I think anything with technology is possible. I've always believed, and I mean this goes into the unicorn theory, right? It's like if everybody in the world seems to have a collective conscious or ability to actually know what a unicorn looks like, and it doesn't actually exist, it had to have had there's something there that we collectively have this idea, right? If you can imagine it, I think you can create it. So there are certain limitations. I don't know if I can like sprout wings, but I can certainly, I mean, man learned to fly. And the ancient Greeks were like only dreaming about that and had myths about it. And in the 19th century, 20th century, we invented airplanes, right? So technically, we did fulfill that imaginary mission. So is it possible that AI could evolve to the point? I think it's entirely possible. It might not look like exactly what we think. It might be assisting us, and somebody then in, working with the AI is able to get more ideas than they could get at one time. Because that's a lot of, like, think about it. Like, sometimes you brainstorm and your brain just doesn't think of stuff. But if you have every single suggestion in the world from anybody at one time around this certain idea, the combinations, if it shows you a list of 50 and you're like, oh, that's it, that's the one I want to use. Well, yeah, technically the AI came up with that, but you're still making that executive choice. I see AI as being assistive long-term to the human experience. I believe and hope, but I truly do think it will be very, very beneficial. I think the more dystopian views of the world are really just designed to stop us from being acceptant of technology as it moves forward. But yeah, I mean, is it possible? I think it's totally possible. I think it just comes down to what that would look like, and if our imaginative iteration in terms of how we engage, if we don't engage with the AI, it doesn't learn, it doesn't move forward anyhow. And it just sits there dormant in a machine. Okay. So we still got to engage with it.
Yeah, I'm curious, just random question. What is the two probabilities, 50-40, 40-60, likelihood that we get our society gets taken over by AIs, or the likelihood that World War III happens and we all nuke ourselves?
Oh man, this is gonna go into a whole other range, like a podcast that we could have.
We don't have to go any deeper than this. I'm just curious.
No, this is cool. Did you guys watch that new Netflix, The Ancient Apocalypse or something like that?
I was watching. Yeah, I would listen to the Joe Rogan episode with the two guys on there.
So I've probably seen every episode of Ancient Aliens on the History Channel like 3 times. It's one of my favorite shows. I think it's so cool. We need to do a whole podcast on that, because there's a lot there, and a lot more than we take credit for and understand in this world. The World War III question versus AI. The only thing that I would say about both of those options is, I don't think if it hasn't already happened, then it will, and there's a reason for that. First, we have a natural desire to survive as humans, and we have a base end desire. Like there's this whole, I don't know, there's like this medical theory how like it's extremely hard to like smash your own hand with a hammer, because of like you just don't, like, we know it's difficult and we don't want to receive the pain. I mean, there's certainly people that have struggled with this, but my point is, like, in general, we have a natural will to live and survive as a general basis of our humanity. So both of those options would lead to the extinction of humanity, which I would most likely believe that we would combat in some way. I don't think that an AI at the end of the day would be designed or need to do that if it thought that we were just going to nuke ourselves anyway, which wouldn't really be a value to it, because then what does it produce, right? At the point at which it becomes sentient, that it wants its own right to survival, then it would probably work more with us to survive in tandem. So the Matrix scenario is like potentially more likely. Long term, then I would think that the AI takes over the society and destroys us. Whereas on the nuke side, again, unless you have a real, negative Mad Men event, I don't think, if we haven't already done that we'll get there. I would venture, this has been always my theory, is that we will, I guess I want to say regress, but we'll fall back into more regional warlords controlling regions of the world than a global nuclear war. There's just no value to it.
Yeah, so I like one more little comment on this before we move into Blue Comet Media. But the way I see it, so like when I was trying to think of a name for my business, I went on, I looked up business name generator, and you supply a few words, and all it can do really is it recombines those words, or like a synonym of those words, and there's no like, it's just those, like it can't really think for itself and create something that's like creative, right? But that's because it's not technically like AI, or it's not advanced AI. So maybe GPT or something like it could kind of make that leap where it's saying, okay, it's going to pull from past media campaigns, like you said, or something like that, and it says, okay, this worked, so maybe I'll give them this suggestion. But I think even at the end of the day, if it can do that, it's only thinking this is what maybe worked in the past, so maybe I can give them something similar to this. It's not thinking, if I see this and I hear it, this would make me want to buy it, because it can't think unless it becomes sentient, like you said.
Well, this is a really good point, and I think that I'll segue this into how I started Blue Comet, because it does start with the name. So I was here as a partner at an agency in Raleigh. Long story how I got from New York and here and whatever. Great company here in town, and I really wanted to do something on my own, and I got this like drive and desire, and my girlfriend at the time was like, if you don't do this now, you're never going to do it. I was like 28, 29 years old, something like that. I was just about to turn 30, and I was like, I felt like I was running out of time if I really wanted to do something myself. So a series of events, obviously COVID was involved in that, like just through my mind, it was like, and I got this phraseology in my head, maybe from the collective AI that we could already be on. We won't go into that. But like,
it's a deep conversation. We could take so many tangents.
But I was like, this phrase, if not now, when? Like every day I was waking up with this phrase, if not now, when? And I was like, this has to mean something. And I literally will not forget this. I was like sitting on the couch, and she comes in and she goes like, oh my God, I can't listen to this anymore. If you're just going to do it, just do it. Like, because I was just complaining, obvious. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. And I did. And so I went through the process of, saying goodbye to my old company and then finding my way into what I was going to do next. And I went to my brother and I said, look, I don't necessarily have everything structured. So, but if we want to start an agency, I said, I can go out there and find clients. I know how to do that. I know how to find the value. I said, we could do Google advertising to start. We could do social media. Have all this list of resources. I had people we could bring together. And going back to the name, I was laying in bed one morning, and it was early, and I didn't realize it at the time. It was 5:15 in the morning, and I just I sat up and I was like, it's got to have a comet in it, because I saw in my eye I saw a comet streak, and I was like, that's it. And then I said, it's got to have a color associated to it, because all great agencies have some sort of mix between emotion and color. And I was like, blue. And I was like, blue comet. This is a true story. And then I was like, well, what do we want to do? What do we want to deliver? What's our value? And it's media. So that's why I called it Blue Comet Media. So that's why it's an example of maybe an AI could have given me that suggestion, maybe or maybe not, but there's no way it could have had the phraseology in my head, understood that I wanted to have color associated with it, and then know that what we deliver is media to come up with Blue Comet Media Agency. So that's an example of that, and that's the same with the Omega Agency. Omega was a word that was in my head when I was looking into working in the blockchain side. And I knew that this term Omega, I had to use it. And that's why we're going to launch this agency in January, focused on branding, positioning, community management, and using some of those services from BCM to deliver social media advertising, Google advertising to clients. I just knew that Omega I knew that's what it was. And when I had a conversation with my friend Garrett, I was like, look, I don't care what we call this new thing, but it's got to have the word Omega in it. And he has that tattooed on his hand. He's like, it's one of my favorite words. So it was synergy again, that in terms of AI, the AI doesn't know that Garrett has tattooed on his hand. He doesn't know that Omega is an important word to me. And he was like, why don't we just call it the Omega Agency? And I was like, done. Perfect. So it's those little things like that in terms of naming. And that kind of gets into the segue of how I started my company. The first company it was born out of a necessity, that is something I had to do. I felt it was being pushed almost cosmically from an outside force to go into this space and do this, because if I didn't do it then I would miss that opportunity. And that's happened in every area of my life, and we can go into those types of things, but I totally believe there's focused pieces of the universe that if it needs you to move in a certain way, you're gonna at least for me, I sometimes wonder, I'm like, okay, I don't know that I know exactly what's going on here, but I know I have to do this right now, and I have to do that, and I go, and then that's why I go do it, and then eventually over time, I think the definition of success for me is consistency over time. It's not about hitting it big or anything like that. That can happen, but the true definition of success is consistency over time.
That's quite simple and very straightforward, the definition of success you just gave. Also, something I want to comment on, you said that how you put all these things together, and I think that kind of just ties into consciousness of humans. And
sure.
We could dive into this argument too about consciousness, if AI is going to ever reach consciousness and what it is exactly. You could dive in so deep, but that is kind of something that separates us from computers and your ability to actually live in the moment. And you just had that feeling where you're like, okay, I want to start this. This feels right, and I'm going to do it. And that's really what separates you or humans from AI right now.
Oh yeah, and I think exactly, you said this feels right, but I want to pair that with the overcoming of fear, because I think that's another thing that the AI or the computer technology they have right now doesn't have a concept of what we would consider these human emotions like love, fear, pain, jubilation, whatever it is, similar to what you're experiencing with Krav. I'm sure a computer can program robot to hit me harder than any human out there. It's probably possible to create that poundage of force, but it's also not going to experience any of that pain of breaking, its hand on me somewhere, in terms of why it wouldn't hit that hard or use that move in that time, based on, oh, that's not the correct thing to do if there's a steel pipe in front of me, right? You have harder bones in your body than using the four knuckles of your hand, which if you break it, you can't deliver anything else afterwards. So now that's a secondary problem that you're considering in how you move forward. So yeah, maybe I would put my elbow up so that if I get hit over here, it's going to still hurt a lot, but I have my hand available that if I gotta like open a door, I don't lose that weapon, right? So it's like it's little things like that. And I think again, like in those moments, the moments of greatest fear that I've ever had have led maybe not exactly, but like, 1-to-1, like the next minute. But when you have these moments of the unknown has led to the greatest success of the things that I've been doing, because again, being consistent over time, knowing what you do well and knowing that you can continue to execute and iterate down into that is what will get you past that fear. And I think some of the greatest inventors or CEOs will tell you, like, fear is something you have to do. You have to have. If you didn't have any fear in what you were doing, you might not be doing the right thing, right? Like you have to constantly have that, and you're saying, okay, not that you wake up and you're like, oh, I can't do anything today, but you're like, all right, like I'm concerned about this. Like I have to think it through. Like what are the challenges that we could have? Like, hey, what is a big fear of ours? What motivates us to move forward as a company or as a person? I think that it's how you deal with the fear and the possible paralysis of fear that is what can help you lead to great success in your personal life and professional.
I think that's pretty deep, and this conversation has kind of come full circle because we keep getting back to the same concepts. But I think it's really valuable how you took the path of working at other places and kind of picking up those skills, and then you realized it was literally a necessity, like you said, to start your own thing. And I think you see that in like the beginning of like employment for most people as well.
Sure.
You go to an internship because you need to learn those skills. You get that experience, and then you go into a full-time job. Do you think that's essential for someone? Do you think they have to go get that experience somewhere else working as an employee, or do you think there's cases where someone can just jump straight into starting their own thing?
It's a great question, and I don't think it's going to be the same for everybody. Like there are some great young founders even here in Raleigh who have done some incredible things right out of college, and I would say though, that's usually not the norm. So I don't usually like to make a statement for everyone or inspire someone on like what's not the norm, right? Like I'm not going to be a professional hockey player. First of all, I'm too old now, but it wasn't going to be the norm for me because I don't have the specific size. I didn't grow up in a specific. There are certain factors and variables that will help certain people that you see that are doing something in a very specific way or specialized way. There's a process of how they got there, right? And they also beat out everybody else who was even competing for them at that level. Now, that being said, the other thing that I would say is, while it's not always necessary to go directly into the workforce, you have to kind of look at two variables. First is what is your life variable, right? What do you desire out of life? I also don't recommend everybody be a founder because it can be incredibly lonely. It can be incredibly tiring. You can deal with a lot of depression. You can feel like, hey, am I supporting my team? I mean, there's a lot of things that being a founder and a CEO, not everybody is okay with that. And that's okay. Like that's another thing is like in our culture and society, we don't always allow people to find what they're really, really good at and specialize. And we have these different tiers based on like earning potential or success rates, et cetera. It's okay. If you're an inventor, don't necessarily be a founder. Find a co-founder. Like invent if you're good at that. Like if you're a creative, create, right? And find where you can add value and be really, really good at that. That doesn't mean that every creator can't be a co-founder. But what I would say, this is the real second point, is about experience. A really good mentor of mine used this scenario, and he goes, if you see a turtle on a fence post, what's the one thing you know?
The turtle's on the fence post.
Yes.
He got put there.
Right, he got put there.
Okay.
Because there is no way a turtle is getting up the side of a fence. It's just not possible. Someone put him there, right? In that scenario, it's important, like, and I guess the other little phraseology is experience is great when it's someone else's. So if you're looking and you want to get ahead in life, use someone else's experience who has gone down a potential path that you may be looking at. And this could be for anything you do at any given moment. Like we have, talking about, this goes back to AI again, we have a collective, data set record of history of virtually every single like plot point of any story that's in anybody's life that you can say, hey, what happened to this person when they did this? Well, it usually leads to these results. I mean, the 1% might have had a different result. I would venture to guess they pivoted somewhere in there. Like, it's not a full linear line, because usually it's like, if you, like we said, if you do a sport or a martial art, or you keep going to work every day, you should build up some capital. You could get to a certain place. You can go on vacation. Like, these are things that, generally speaking, if you consistent, you'd be able to achieve. And I think that's the same thing, as I think if you use other people's experience wisely, which, hey, if you want to pay your lawyers to get great experience, totally think that's worth it, because I've had lawyers that I've paid that have told me things that have saved a significant amount of challenge moving forward that I just wasn't aware of. And it's just I didn't have that experience. So I'm not saying it's always free experience. You might have to develop a relationship or go to a job, like you're saying, or go to an internship and spend that time capital that you have to gain that experience to get you where you want to go. But the last thing that I would add to that is a lot of people don't know where they want to go or where they're going. And so I think it's important at least to define that out. Like, decide what you really want out of life. And I've always told people, like, if it's not being a freelancer and it's not being a business, and you actually really want to go to a job and work with other people and have that community, there's nothing wrong with that. That's awesome. Like, there's great startups out there. But if you want to forge the path of being like on this way on your own, no, it's going to be a very lonely path. It's going to be you versus the world most of the time. Not in a bad way. It's just you have to accept that and be honest and open about that. And then you find out what your value in your data set is, and then you can work into that.
Yeah, I think that's very insightful. I think a lot of people underestimate the amount of sacrifice. Like, if you really want to be successful in career, especially an entrepreneur or a startup founder, like, you have to sacrifice a lot of other things in your life. And if you want to travel the world and experience all these things when you're young and have a family and kids, like, you're going to have to think, okay, you really have to balance your time with everything. So I really appreciate, we really need to have you back on. I mean, it seems like we could have dived into every conversation. Yeah. Like, we could have just took 100 tangents.
Totally down.
Yeah. So we ask every guest we have on, we ask them a final question. And it's just, what goal do you have in your life, whether it be like a personal goal or a career goal? And then what steps are you doing to achieve that goal?
That is an awesome question. I think that I would have to break it down to personal and professional, although for me they would overlap slightly. I mean, there's obviously some specific personal goals that I have, but I think one of the things that I have always wanted to do, and it's actually, if you look at, like, I don't know, I think I had a vision board from like 8 years ago or 9 years ago or something like that. I've always had a vision to support, build, or better the society that's around me from a direct physical perspective, whether that was building a school, building a hospital, or donating significantly to these types of advances in research. Everything that I'm trying to do professionally, let's say a tremendous amount of money, the only driver that I would have would be able to give back to the collective civilization as a whole, because there's no point in just amassing a ton of wealth for yourself and then not raising everybody else up in the civilization around you. Now, that might just come from my personal religious beliefs about in the Christian faith, obviously giving back to the society, taking care of the poor, all those kinds of things. So those have always been core drivers for me of why do I get up and do what I do every day? It's so that my team can be successful to achieve their goals, because that's the number one goal you should have as a founder, is how can I make my team successful to do what they want to do and achieve their goals every single day, what their desires, wants, and needs are. And then collectively, if I'm doing that at a grander scale, it would be finding ways to improve humanity's experience here on Earth, which I think if a lot of founders collectively put that into their minds and really thought about that. Now, it happens secondarily. Like, Jeff Bezos has employed tons of people now. Of course, they let off a lot of people, but I mean, Amazon's growth did give a lot of people jobs over the last 20 years, right? Great. That's awesome. That provides, income and money. I'd like to see a little bit more, I don't want to say altruism, but I'd like to see a little bit more of investment and research in and actually building physical things. Build more actual physical school buildings. Think about why we don't see those happening all the time. There's some disconnect here. So that would be I guess kind of a combined, overall professional goal with the personal, why I do what I do every day. that I think a lot of founders can get wrapped up in like what we want and what we're trying to do, and even like seeing your company be successful. Just always turn into the human perspective. I try to think of every single day how I can make my team more successful at what they want to achieve. And then if that motivates us to get more sales or build a new product, whatever it is, it's great. But that's really what you should be in it for, is how to better and more enrich the people around you.
Well, let me tell you, John, it was an honor having you on, man. I really appreciate it.
This is great, guys. Thanks.
And real quick, before we do let you go, any recommendations or handoffs, books, things like that you want to leave with the audience, and where the audience can find you or what you're working on?
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I'll kind of say from, if you're listening to this podcast and you're, on the younger side looking to get into the workforce, or you're looking for some professional development, I mean, there's some initial books that are just awesome. I can't remember who wrote Good to Great is a foundational book. And then the second one is How the Mighty Have Fallen. Talks about how companies scale, become great companies. And then the second book talks about how great companies become not great companies. And you can see those tracks and arc. And those books were really foundational for me when I was just starting out in business. I think also the EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System book, Traction, is huge. Traction is awesome. It helps you to understand how to, take operational perspectives and build your understanding of your team's capabilities, your capabilities. I would recommend those two books initially if you're trying to think about a little bit even about your own personal development. And then if you want to get in touch with me, my email is john@bluecomet.media. I am actually, this is something I was put on LinkedIn. I am open to having any 15-minute conversation with anyone out there that wants to get in touch with me, schedule some time, send me an email. Doesn't matter if you're in college, you're a young founder, you're somebody who is interested in anything we do from a service perspective. I'll have a 15-minute conversation with anybody, as long as we find a good time that works for us, just to learn a little bit more about you. That was something that another mentor of mine said, that he said you should always have 15 minutes for anybody on the face of the planet that is interested in learning and wants to actually better themselves. I'll talk to anybody about those things. So reach out to me. It's john@bluecomet.media.
I think that's really it sounds like you're really trying to help other people, which I think is really important. But I will say, careful throwing around the altruism word now, because I think that's been permanently misappropriated.
Oh, I would agree with that. There's definitely all those videos that have been created. I would actually like to build an actual school. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, awesome, man. We appreciate you having on, and make sure we'll drop the links in. So make sure to reach out to him, because I really enjoyed it. And I'm sure you guys will if you guys schedule a conversation with him.
This was great, Sam, Kyle. Thank you so much for having me on board. This was an awesome conversation.
Pleasure.
That's it for today's episode. We hope you enjoyed the conversation and would greatly appreciate a review to help others find the show. If you know someone that might find use out of our podcast, be sure to send it their way. We release new episodes every Tuesday, so hit that follow and subscribe button to stay up to date. Catch you next week.